live? Is it Tuesday at 2 p.m.? Is it time for the ROMKids Show? Hello everyone, it's your favorite camp director right here, Kieran Mukherjee, coming at you from the same place we've been the last two episodes, but now inside. We've now been up here 3 weeks. As many longtime viewers know, we've been in the process of moving. And it looks like that process might finally be coming to a conclusion. But today we're inside. We've got some bird friends right here with a swan and a loon. Because last week on the show we had ornithologist Dr. Santiago Claremont on talking all about birds and their wings and how they do different things. And you can see that up on YouTube right now. Next week on the show, mammologist Burton Lim joins us to talk all about whales, their evolution, the different types, how we can save them, in our brand new exhibit opening up hopefully later this summer, end of July, start of August, the great whales up close and personal. So we're really excited. That's the season finale of the show up on, if you Google ROMKids Show, you can find over 40 episodes full of stories of science, art, and history, from the Martian landscape all the way to archaeology, because that's our theme today with Dr. Craig Cipolla, who's joining us for the second time on the show to talk about the basics of archaeology and what all that is. So if you have questions about archaeology, the study of our past, drop them in the chat. We have real live archaeologist curator at the Royal Ontario Museum who's here to take your questions. We're going to do a few demonstrations as well to get an idea of how archaeology works and the power of preservation and what that can tell us all about the past. If you are watching from your home, your kitchen, from your virtual classroom, hello, hello, hello. Good to see you. Love having you here every week. And if you are watching on YouTube, what's going on? Hello, our friends. With that said, I think it is now time for the theme song portion of the event. Here we go. My loon friend. All right, here we go. Welcome to the ROMKids Show with me. We'll do some crafts and tell some stories. Let's talk about science, art, and history. Welcome to the ROMKids Show, starring and there you go. It is starring you and me. I like that. That's the theme song portion of the event. If I can get that to not, I'm just gonna put it right down. That way it can't fall. And now it's time to move to the art table, which this time is just like this. Slide right over. Okay, so we're doing a number of demonstrations today, talking all about archaeology. So with that said, I think it's time we should introduce our guest before we get all the materials we need. I'm gonna boost the light right there, turn on the sound. Dr. Craig Cipolla, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hey, I apologize. I have some really bad pollen allergies, so if I lose my voice, just because I'm really excited here and I'm allergic to pollen.
Cool. You know what? We'll make it work. We like it. We're going to turn that sound right up. This is Craig's second appearance on the show. Go onto ROMKids or ROMKids Show or on YouTube, and you can find our first episode together where we spoke all about experimental archaeology, which is where you take things from the past and try and figure out how they work by sort of doing it today. And so on today's episode, though, we're actually going to try and talk about what archaeology actually is. So first group of things I want you to get is a little plate, okay? A chocolate chip cookie, preferably as hard as possible. If it's soft, this activity doesn't work. We know that because we did this before and it doesn't work as well. So as hard of a cookie as you can, and then a little skewer, okay? And then we're gonna demonstrate sort of how we can excavate or dig things out of the ground, all right? So while you're grabbing those things, Craig, so excited to have you here. I guess
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
My first question for you is, what is an archaeologist?
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you for that question. I am an archaeologist, as you know, as you've heard. An archaeologist is basically anyone who looks at the stuff that people have left behind in the past, and they tell a story about what those people's lives were like. So, contrary to popular opinion, a lot of people say that archaeologists, they're associated with dinosaurs. No, of course not. You know that, Kieran, because you love dinosaurs.
I love dinosaurs.
Those are paleontologists, right? They study biology in the past. But of course, I study humans. That's a type of biology, but humans in the past to tell their history through the stuff that they left behind.
Oh, I really like that. I really like that. Yeah, we do tend to have a bias towards natural history on this show, so it's nice to get a little bit into some world cultures. Okay, so you have your cookie in front of you. And what I want you to do is, as carefully as you can, I want you to try and get those chocolate chips out of your cookie without damaging the chocolate chip. Here what we're doing is we're sort of pretending that the chocolate chips are artifacts. And I guess that's a good question. We didn't talk about this though. But Craig, what is an artifact?
Whew. Artifacts are everywhere around us right now, including those great birds that were behind you, those wooden birds. Those aren't really birds. Those are artifacts made by people. So artifacts are anything that people make to help them do a job. And it could be not just making the object, it could be just taking a stone that's not modified at all and using it to hammer something in. That stone is now an artifact because he used it as a human tool.
Whoa, okay, so like a cup is an artifact.
Absolutely. Your iPhone or your smartphone, artifact. Do you want me to, can I give you a little test?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm going to show you an artifact. I want you to tell me what you think it is, what it is.
Oh, okay, so what we're seeing on the screen right here is it looks like a white object. To me, it looks like a Christmas tree, I'm not going to lie. Or like a pine tree. That's sort of what it looks like to me. I can see that it's sort of shaped. There's almost sort of like ripples, so maybe it's rock.
Actually, I can tell you right now, here's a clue, because I was holding this just now, and I almost cut my finger on the end right here that I'm pointing to. So it's very pointy. It's absolutely made of stone. You're on the way to becoming an archaeologist right now, right? It is the shape of a Christmas tree. But I don't think it's actually supposed to look like a Christmas tree. This is something we find all over North America. This is a stone tool, and someone who is really good at working with stone took another harder stone at one point and shaped this into this very pointy thing. They stuck it onto a stick, they tied it, and they used it to go hunting. And so this is a spear point at one point.
Huh, a spear point. That's so interesting. We learned a lot from that. Okay, Mike, I'm going to ask a question on that. How do we know? Okay, so the rock remains, but how do you know that it used to be like a spear point and maybe not like an arrowhead? How do we know that?
Well, I'm just guessing because I don't know for sure for this one. Actually, this one was made by a friend of mine. So this isn't actually ancient. It's someone who knows how to make stone tools. So there's still people that make stone tools. And so they made this for me so I could teach with it. But it's meant to replicate one that we think was used as part of a spear. Sometimes archaeologists get incredibly lucky and they actually find, once in a while, the entire spear with the point on the end. But for the most part, they usually just find the stone. So we basically make inferences, we make guesses and test hypotheses like we were talking about on the last show when we talked about experimental archaeology. That's one way that we make these guesses, but sometimes we find the whole thing still assembled when we're really, really, really lucky.
And then from there, we know when we find it again that it's probably a similar thing. I really like how you brought up the word hypothesis. That's a good word. That's a big word. I think that's our word of the day. You can also see my chocolate chip cookie. I'm starting to get rid of sort of the ground around it. What does hypothesis mean?
Well, it's basically just an idea that you come up with. You say, I think this is what this artifact might be. It might be a Christmas tree ornament, right? And so if it's a Christmas tree ornament, then you come up with some other ideas. Well, if it's a Christmas tree ornament, it would probably have something that would hang off the Christmas tree, right? Or something like that. And I can't find any evidence that this thing was hanging off a Christmas tree. There's not a hole in it. There's not any wire wrapped around it. So that's not a good hypothesis because I've tried to test it and I haven't found any other supporting evidence. So then we have to modify our hypothesis and say, well, wait a second, I cut my finger on this.
Yeah.
Maybe this thing is meant to stick into something, and then you just keep going from there, making more questions and seeing if you could support those questions with the things that you observe.
So if you're a kid at home and maybe your parents are like, wow, you ask a lot of questions, that's okay. That's you learning. That's you guessing. That's you trying to figure out the world around you. So question away, unless I haven't had my coffee. Because then maybe my answers aren't going to be as good. You can see I got almost all of my chocolate chip out right there. It's still a little bit messy, so I got to clean that up a little bit. I'm interested in seeing how your chocolate chips are doing. Okay.
And Kieran,
Yeah.
Can I just jump in here? I mean, I want you to be very careful with this chocolate chip cookie because, as you know, you only have one chance to excavate this. Archaeological sites, you only get to excavate them once. You can never go back and excavate them, so you have to do it perfectly the first time.
Yeah.
So please pay attention, kids at home.
Yeah.
Be very careful of those chocolate chips.
They're delicious. They're a valuable resource. Okay, there are
Yeah,
lots.
that's
There are, as we know, there's lots of different biologists, right? Like, so on the show, we've had folks like Antonia who studies insects. We've had biologists that study leeches. We've had biologists that study bats. There are many different types of archaeologists too that study all different sorts of things. Craig, what do you study? What do you learn about?
Well, thank you for asking that question. Well, I am lucky enough. I'm a settler here in Canada and in North America. I actually work on North American archaeology. I have that privilege. And all the field work I do in my entire career, which is actually longer than you'd think, has always been done with, I work in the US right now, so it's always been done with Native American governments. And we basically work together to create a way of doing the archaeology. And typically when I do archaeology, the community asks me, I don't go in and ask them, which is amazing. I don't know if you have any pictures. I could talk about one of those pictures perhaps.
Yeah.
To talk a little bit more. Let's see, is it the one? Okay, perfect. This is a picture of me in a very big hole. And this is why I love my job. In that moment, I'm standing at the bottom of a cellar that is 300 years old.
Whoa.
And I'm the first person to stand in that cellar. But that is a cellar within a house that was lived in by Mohegan people. That's an indigenous tribe in Connecticut, where I've been working for about 12 years now. And we do archaeology together. And that's actually an important thing to remember for those of us who are settlers here in North America like me. Most of the archaeology that's under your feet was not made by your ancestors if you're a settler. So you have to be respectful of that, and you have to recognize that we're walking on someone else's land. And that's part of what we do at Mohegan. We teach our students how to do really respectful archaeology of indigenous history.
I really like that. It's really important that when we look at, stuff from the past, objects from the past, that we treat them with respect and thoughtfulness and kindness, because that belongs to a community. That belongs to a community, especially when we look at indigenous objects, communities that still very much exist today. And so we always need to ask for permission from these communities before we go to work. And then when we do our work, we need to do it together and collaboratively so that we can do things thoughtfully, respectfully, and with kindness. Okay, so that's a really, really big, important thing we want folks to take away.
And Kieran, I don't know if you have that other picture of me just talking with two other people. Mm-hmm. If you could just show that really quick.
Yeah.
Not only do we get permission, but I actually do archaeologists with indigenous people who are archaeologists. So that's me talking to my very close friends and colleagues. One is Mohegan and one is otherwise indigenous. And we do archaeology together. We've been doing archaeology together for about over 10 years. And so not only do they just say, well, yeah, we give you permission to do this archaeology, their students come and work with me. And of course, they're alongside me the whole time. So that's really important. I'm really lucky to do this work. Mm-hmm. I love doing it, and I really miss it. So I'm glad I get to talk to you about it now.
We love that. Now, I'm going to show a picture of you sitting inside a dig right here. Because we're sort of doing excavation on our cookie. But something that we're not doing maybe correctly here is putting these lines down. What are all those lines? What's that sort of net thing sort of on top?
You know, it's funny. I love string. I'm like a cat. I love string. I even string things out when I just put some sod down in the backyard. I strung it out because I miss doing archaeology so much. Yeah, so the string, I digress though. But yeah, the string is just meant to make sure I know exactly where everything came from. And so every one of those squares that is formed by the string, I know exactly where that square sat. And so that means when I dig up an artifact like this, 20 years later, I can actually figure out, I know exactly where it came from in the ground, in the depth, or where I found it, and within a centimeter, easily.
Now, why is that information so important? Because what we're doing right here is, we're taking the object from the ground, but the ground around it has important information in it too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So here, I'm going to use this this prop again. Mm-hmm. So let's say I found an archaeological site with 3 of these all grouped together right next to each other. So that's one archaeological site. And then I found a different archaeological site with one of these stuck into the leg bone of a deer.
Whoa.
How would you interpret the difference between those two?
Maybe if it was stuck in the deer, maybe there was like hunting going on?
Sure, okay. And what's the other one maybe?
Yo, give it to me again, because I already forgot. I got really excited.
Three of these next to each other, just laying next to each other.
Maybe it's to use, like later, maybe it's storage.
Yeah, maybe the person's making them and just storing them, and then they left them there. So how did you know those differences, Kieran? Between the first one and the second one? How did you know?
I guess
you're an archaeologist. How did you know?
Archaeologist? I'm a detective. Yeah, I just try to think. I try to use my logic skills and my understanding skills, and I thought about like, okay, well, it's a sharp thing. I know that sharp things can be used for hunting. If it's in a leg bone, then likely it was used for hunting. I just put sort of things together.
Absolutely. You were looking at the relationship that you observed. So one was in relation to an animal leg bone, and one was in relation to a bunch of other points like this. So archaeologists love this. They need to control for how they find things. That's why we don't want people just walking to our archaeological site and saying, oh, look what I found. This is really neat. Because I can never know where that was, right? Mm-hmm. So that's really important. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're very careful about that.
And it's the same too in paleontology too, right? Is you want to make sure that level of sand, where it came from, can be from different periods of time too. So it's very, very important. As cool as it might feel to be out in the field and you see something cool or you want to go dig something up, it's important that we leave it there, that we talk to the community that the land is on, to let them know that there's something there. Maybe it's an object that's not supposed to be dug up, something like that. And then after that, we want to leave it with professionals from the community and with archaeologists so they can get all the information, because we don't want to lose anything, because you're sort of like a time detective.
Yeah, well, if you want to call me that, I'll take it.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's just like that. It's just like that chocolate chip cookie. You only get one chance to take it apart. You'll never be able to put that chocolate chip cookie back to the way it was at the beginning of the show. The same thing is for archaeology. You need to record as many relationships as you can. Were those 2 chips that you ate next to each other, or were they on opposite sides of the cookie? I don't know now because I wasn't watching.
I wasn't watching. I didn't write it down. And so if you want to take, if you want to take this cookie to the next level, what you want to do is you want to take your string so you can map everything out. You then want to have a pad of paper with you so you can write where you found things. And then after you have all that information, because information is power, you can make better hypotheses, come up with better questions, because you have all of this data. So with that said, because we're doing a good job of riffing, I'm going to try and get back to the script here. I'm going to move my cookie experiment away. And now what I want you to do is I want you to grab a piece of paper towel. Okay, you can do this on paper too, but it works best on paper towel. So grab yourself some paper towel. Then I want you to grab washable markers and a Sharpie or a permanent marker. All right, so grab all those things. Okay, something we sort of talked about a little bit here, but we haven't exactly brought it up specifically, is what is the archaeological record?
Ooh, well, it's everything people left behind from the past. It could be their house that someone lived in, like that house I was standing in the photo. It could be the arrowhead that was just shot in the woods and lost and never touched again by another person. Anything left in the ground is a record, because it's a record of time going deeper, going older as you go deeper, and space. Finding it where you find it is important, right? If you find it in North America, it's different than if you find it over in Europe, right? So yeah, that's the archaeological record.
Okay, so with that said, what I want you to do now, you're going to have to go with me a little bit. Craig and I sort of designed this activity like 15 minutes ago. Is with your Sharpie, I want you to draw things that are permanent, okay? And permanent is something like plastics or concrete or rocks. And we're taking it a little bit here because over time rocks will degrade, okay? But over the course of hundreds of years, a rock structure can stay up. So permanent things, maybe like a car, I want you to draw with your Sharpie. Organic things, so maybe things like people or trees or grass or animals or pets or even clothing, such as like my like a cotton shirt or something like that. I want you to draw with your washable markers. So to simplify that, draw your city with a permanent marker and draw your people with washable markers, okay? Try and do that. I'm gonna come back to this because we're gonna do a little bit of a science experiment. Oh, we have a question for you from the group chat, Craig. Grade 2s at Sterling Hall want to know, how many artifacts do you usually find on a dig? That's a good question.
Woo, I forgot to, so that's a good question. And I'm just gonna give you a straight up answer, then I will explain it a little bit. I usually find, in the last 10 years or so when I dig every summer, I take about 6,000 to 10,000 objects out of the ground. And that's because not only do I work with the Mohegan people on their land, I study the last 500 years of their history. So it involves settler colonialism. So we have a lot of European mass-produced things like this type of plate, right? So like this is one, right? That's a broken, like if you have one plate and you break it, that becomes 80,000 pieces, right? Because it gets smashed up.
Yep.
So that's why it's so many. But yeah, that's basically what we record. And I should also mention that none of those artifacts come to the Royal Ontario Museum. They stay on Mohegan land. So it's fantastic. The Mohegan have their own archaeological lab, and I need to go visit soon because I really miss that. But yeah, that's the answer.
I like that. Great question. If you have questions, we got Dr. Craig Cipolla here with us right now. Great archaeologist, great guy, also loves baseball, but the wrong team.
Yeah. We're not going to get into that because that would take another hour.
Okay, so I have a question. What are common things that we find? Okay, like are there, if we can, like archaeologists work all over the world and societies and cultures and communities are all over the world. Is there some stuff that like we sort of find everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so people like me who study settler colonialism, they can go anywhere in the world and study the last 500 years and they'll be able to recognize most of the stuff that's dug up because again, it's the stuff that's made like mass-produced European-made stuff. But stone, anything made of stone is going to pretty much last a very long time. Some of the oldest archaeological sites in North America are 20,000 years old and plus, more than that. Those are all basically just collections of stone tools. Animal bones sometimes last, but usually it's going to be just the teeth because the teeth are very hard. Ceramics last, but we only have about 3,000 years of ceramics here in North America, about give or take. And so those are the hard bits that last. So it'd be really fun if you could look down at what you're wearing right now, everyone at home, and think about all the things you're wearing, what is going to last. Like for instance, like you can see my shirt here. This shirt's going to go away. This button's going to last a long time because it's made of plastic. So if you're going to find a line of buttons if my shirt was laying on the ground and just left there.
I like that. We have another question. Oh, this one's a personal question. What's the best artifact that you've ever found? Or what's something that's been really meaningful that you found?
That's a really good question. That's a very common question that I get wherever I go when people know that I'm an archaeologist. Um, it's a very hard question to answer. The most recently, I think, that picture, some of those pictures I showed you with me digging, those are pictures where Mohegan families lived in the last couple hundred years. And so it's a really nice to be able to dig those very personal spaces. And what we found underneath those houses is that they protected their houses by burying crystals around their houses. So I would say, like, finding those crystals there, those secret crystals put there to protect their people and the corn they were growing, is really a privilege to be able to know about and to learn about with the Mohegan people.
I like that. Okay, so let me explain sort of what I'm doing here, because we still have one more demonstration to do, and we still have like a lot of questions. So this is the drawing that I did, Craig. I'm just going to show it to you right here.
I love it.
Okay.
Yep.
So I drew sort of an apartment building. I don't know, and I drew a house. Okay. Now, all of the black that I use are permanent things. So like rock or stone or concrete. So you can see how my house, the outline of it is in black. And then you can see like my windows, they're black too. However, my house has a wooden roof. Okay, that's an organic material. That over time can rot away. It also has wood beams in the windows and wood beams for its door. Same with like my apartment building over here. Then I have my friend Sam right in the middle. They are wearing some red clothes, having a great day, all right? People, and often many of our clothes, are also organic. So what happens over time? I want you to get a container, a flat container, and I want you to put water just on the bottom. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put our drawing right into the middle. If you're still working on your drawing, keep working on yours. You can always do the science experiment of it later, the demonstration of it later. So my hypothesis, Craig, and we learned what a hypothesis was, which is sort of like an educated guess earlier, is that the permanent things, like this concrete and rock and stone, will stay over the course of maybe 400 years. But this organic stuff, like these roofs, these window frames, and this person, are going to disappear. Okay, let's see what happens. All right, so we're going to drop it into the water and see what happens. Wait, how do you want me to do this? Oh, pull it up forward. That's smart, because then people can see it. Because it's not just about me. All right, so here it is. Here's my drawing. Let's see what happens. We have not tested this. This is the first test. All right, so you can see in our drawing, Craig, I'll sort of angle you a bit. You can see it's starting to disappear. So, our person is starting to disappear. The clothes are bleeding away. And remember, when you use washable marker, it's water soluble, which means that it interacts with water. It starts to lift away. However, our permanent marker stays, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to leave this behind. You can see maybe only 100 years has passed. So the wooden roof is still sort of there, but it's not looking great. You can see, the clothes, they're ripped up now. They're not really wearable, but they're still there. I wonder what will happen, over the next 30 minutes. Will you still be able to see those things? And this is sort of a great example of time, right, Craig? And what that does?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people tend to think of like things like stone as like it just stays the same always. But it's not always staying the same. It's always relating to the world around it, and therefore it's falling apart. Even stone is falling apart slowly. And of course, organic materials are doing the same, but at a much faster rate. So yeah, absolutely. You can see time passing. And even like things like iron will degrade. So absolutely, that's what you're seeing in the tub there.
I like that. Okay, cool. And we came up with that 15 minutes ago, friends. We brought that, as I'm moving the water, so that can sort of represent like wind and things or people coming through and trampling over it. It starts to move that ink as well, okay? Because, people keep coming across, land that people lived on before, and they also tend to move things too. Okay, that's really interesting.
Yep.
We're blazing through this. We've covered a lot of things. Okay, what can artifacts and like objects, what can they tell us about the people who made them?
Well, they can tell us all kinds of things. I mean, they can tell us what their houses looked like. They could tell us what kind of technology they had. They could tell us what kind of clothes they wore, what kind of food they ate, what they did to the environment or how they interacted with the environment, how they interacted with other groups of human beings, how they worshipped. All these wonderful things. We can learn those things, at least in part, by doing archaeology.
I like that. And you can see how trade has happened too, because if maybe like a material isn't natural to that community, you can see that they've maybe traded something for it, and it shows interactions between groups of people. There's so much that you can learn. Okay, we have another question from the audience, which really relates to what we're about to talk about. Okay, and the question is can you find artifacts in your backyard if you dig deep enough? And then I have a follow-up question for you, Craig.
Sure. You can find artifacts everywhere. It depends on the history of the land that you live on, of course, but where I live, I'm in Toronto. So there's literally artifacts everywhere. And of course, unfortunately for me, I live right in the middle of the city. So I have artifacts being blown in by the wind into my yard all the time, and I have to pick up the trash, right? The chip bags, those are artifacts, believe it or not. Technically speaking, they were made by a person to do a job to hold the chips in there, right? So yeah, there's absolutely artifacts all around us.
We recently got a new house, and one of the things that we found that was still in the house were cans of cat food. And so that's an artifact that was left behind by the previous owner, and we can learn things from that, My hypothesis is that the previous owner used to feed the neighborhood cats. And so that's my hypothesis, that she had the cat food by the door so that she could feed the neighborhood cats. And I guess we'll find out when we move in if there's a bunch of neighborhood cats every morning.
You could also, Kieran, you can invite me over, and if I start sneezing, you'll know that the cat lived at your house.
That's another way. That's a tool that we can use.
That's right.
I like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think digging a little bit deeper into our viewer's question, our friend's question there, is sure, we're making artifacts today. It's stuff humans made, and that can even be a mask that you see lying around or like a coffee cup. But I think maybe what we're wondering is, can I find something from a long, long, long time ago? And with that, my question to you, Craig, is should we go looking for those things?
Well, could you find something old? Absolutely. North America has tens of thousands of history, if not 100,000 years of human history in it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, it's okay to be curious about the world. I think that's really good. I love that. I have kids too. I love when they ask me questions and they want to go out and check stuff out. So that's great. But you shouldn't be disturbing the archaeological record if you can avoid it at all costs. So don't go digging a hole just to find history, because of course, just like that chocolate chip cookie, if you dig those chocolate chips out, you're never going to get them back. You're not going to be able to tell me where they came from, right? And so I always have my kids walk down the sidewalk with me, and they notice patterns about the world. And that's like doing archaeology, but that's a much safer archaeology because they're not taking stuff out of the cookie, so to speak. That makes sense.
I like that. And we're going to do our final demonstration now. I think we're going to miss a lot. We have to bring you back because we have not even spoken about the archaeology of us yet. But what I want you to do, friends, is I want you to grab some grapes or some small tomatoes, even cherries. I don't know if they're in season. I just made that up. But a small type of food, okay? And then I want you to grab a few containers. I have this little Pyrex right here. I want you to grab a few containers. Do that for me. Okay. There are 3 really important things to archaeology. We don't have a ton of time to cover them. But I'm going to we're going to do a speed round here, okay?
Speed round.
And I'm going to ask you to just hit this up really, really quickly. Before the show, Craig told me that there are three most important things, parts of archaeology are. The first one is space. Why is that important?
Just got to know where you found it. Whose land did you find it on? What country is it in? And how is it related to the objects around it? So that's space.
Love it. Space. That's great. Second one is how old.
Right? So yeah. So if you look in your backyard, you might have all kinds of history, right? So you need to know it's not just from one time period. It could be from a very specific old time period or a newer time period. So you can do that by looking at what type of artifact it is, or you can test it in certain ways to find how old it is. So there's space and there's time that we've covered so far.
Oh, I like that. And finally, form. What does that mean?
Form is pretty basic. You figure out what it is you dug up. Is it a chip bag? Is it an arrowhead? Is it a broken plate? That's the form. So you got space, you got time, and you got form.
Okay, I really like all of that. Now we got to get to our call to action. But what I want you to do with your grapes now, okay? Because here we're testing preservation. Preservation is really key. Craig, real quickly, and I think we've covered this a little bit, but tell me exactly why is preservation so important to the archaeological record?
Well, the other reason why you need to know where you found it is because you have to know what environment it was left in, right? So if it was frozen for 1,000 years, it's going to last in a different way than if it's in the desert for 1,000 years versus a swamp for 1,000 years versus the acidic soils of Ontario for 1,000 years, right? So all of these things eat away the archaeological record at different rates. And so in order to fully understand that picture down there, I need to understand the acidity of that water that picture's in, that you're working on. That's a kind of an example of what we're talking about.
Oh, I like it. Okay, so what I want you to do with your grapes is I want you to put one grape in one container, and I want you to leave it on the windowsill somewhere in your house with a second grape in a second container. I want you to leave that container outside, like if you have a balcony or like, a backyard, see if you can do that. With your third grape, I want you to put it maybe in a container and then put it in the freezer. The freezer. And maybe with your fourth grape, you can put it in a little container and put it in like a dark cupboard. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to write down where you placed all these things so you don't forget about it, because these things are going to rot and we don't want rotten stuff in your house. I want you to write down the date that you put these things in these places, and then and the condition they're in. So this is like a fully eatable grape right now, nice and ripe, totally good to go. You can even take a picture. Then what I want you to do is in 1 week's time, 7 days from now, come back, take another picture, examine your grapes. How have they changed? Because that will sort of tell you and show you how organic things can break down over time. Make some hypotheses, make some guesses, What do you think is going to happen with the one in the freezer? What do you think is going to happen to the one outside? Okay, we have to do our call to action. We got to wrap it up. It's all about being, we learned a lot about being a time detective today, how to use our skills, how to come up with questions to look at things, how to examine objects. We know that we shouldn't go outside and start digging holes places because we can lose a lot of information that way, and we might also not have permission either. But what's a way that we can still use our skills, our time detective skills, out in the world around us?
Well, I always like to go on the subway and look at all the patterns in the paint on the floor and on the walls, and I try to figure out how people move through that space even when there are no people around. I can see how they move through the space based on the wear patterns in the paint. You can look for all kinds of patterns of how people use the world and how they wear down the world around you. It could be the curbs in front of your house. You just go out and look for those patterns and try to come up with ideas about why they are the way that you see them, and how that relates to human activity. And that's a great way of sharpening your time detective skills.
I like that. My favorite wear pattern is at the Royal Ontario Museum. At the basement near the studio where I work is a staircase that goes up the museum, and you can see these indents right next to the right-hand railing of essentially millions of children over the years going up and down the staircase to go visit and explore the Royal Ontario Museum. And so many of those are our camp kids and school visit kids. That's one of my favorite wear patterns. Another thing you can do is you can take photographs, right?
Absolutely, you can take photographs. You can make maps. Like the picture that I showed you with all those strings. What I'm doing in that picture is I'm making a map. So you can make your own map. If you could get some graph paper or make your own graph paper, that's a great way to make a little map. You absolutely, if you have access to a camera, you can take pictures and drawings, of course. Yeah.
I like that. That's a great thing to do. Take a little notebook, go outside, and what's a fun activity is to maybe pick a corner or a park, okay? And then every, month or so, go to that park and take a photo, all right? What kind of trees? How are the trees doing? Is there a bunch of trash there? Why would there be a bunch of trash there? Is there construction? What's going on? And record all those little things. And that's you using your archaeological mind to interpret the world around you. Okay, so lots of fun ways to be a time detective today. Craig, oh my gosh, what a great show!
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
It was fun. Thanks for having me, and it was a lot of fun. I'll come back if you want me to.
Absolutely, we're definitely gonna have Craig back on a future season. Thank you so much. Take a look at those activities, those demonstrations, because that's such a great way to explore the world of being an archaeologist. Next week on the show, it's the final episode of season 3, all right? Burton Lim returns to the show to talk all about great whales, blue whales, what's going on with whales, how they're kind of related to hippopotamuses, what's up with that, right? As well as a brand new exhibit that should open this summer, late July, early August, hopefully. We're really excited for that, okay? So next week, 2 p.m., final episode of Season 3 of the ROMKids Show, Burton Lim and whales. Thank you so much, Craig, for joining us. We had a lot of fun with everyone in their kitchens, at home, in their virtual classrooms, or on YouTube. Thank you for joining us again. Stay safe, wear a mask. We love you. Bye, friends.